Welcome to Lessons in Dyslexic Thinking, conversations with the world's most inspiring dyslexics, where we find out what dyslexic thinking is and how each of us can employ it to change the world. This podcast is sponsored by Microsoft, who, like us, are passionate about empowering dyslexic thinking. Their free learning accelerator tools like Reading Progress and Reading Coach help dyslexic thinkers thrive. Find out more by clicking the Microsoft link in the podcast notes. Today I'm joined by Alex Wright, entrepreneur and co-founder of the brilliant drinks brand Dash. Alex, you've used your dyslexic thinking to disrupt the drinks market by turning wonky fruit into flavoured sparkling waters. Now Dash Water is one of the UK's best-selling seltzer brands with a 57% market share, and you're sold in 20 countries. You're also passionate about creating purpose-led businesses and working sustainably. You've said that we were trying to come up with a product to use for this rejected wonky fruit when we saw the soft drink stuffed with sugar and artificial ingredients, and that was the light bulb moment. Infusing wonky fruit into spring water to create a delicious drink without sugar or sweetener. Welcome, Alex. It's fantastic to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
So when I read your story, I can see dyslexic thinking in almost everything that you do. Tell us a little bit about your dyslexic thinking and how you think it helps you to do what you do.
My dyslexic thinking, it was diagnosed at a relatively early age. So my mum, I think she wasn't diagnosed as being a dyslexic, but she latterly thought after leaving school that she would be. And so she, quite early on, wanted to make sure that I was tested for being dyslexic, which I absolutely was. And it really helped me at school in particular by being able to understand what I was good at and what I wasn't going to be very good at. And the stuff that I wasn't going to be very good at, it wasn't because I was necessarily stupid. I think one of the issues with our education system is that at an earlier age it's very generalist, and one does a lot of subjects and one isn't able to specialise in subjects that one is great at from an earlier stage. When I was able to do that, it was hugely beneficial for me because it meant that I could try and excel at the areas that I was good at and then just leave the areas that I was pretty rubbish at to the side.
And do you think your entrepreneurial flair came out at school?
I think it did come out at school, definitely. I was always brimming full of ideas, always trying to buy a product from some source and then try to upsell it to my mates. So definitely at an early age, it was definitely there.
40% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic, and if you look at all of the traits that make dyslexics successful, one of the big ones is doing things differently and trying to solve problems. That's obviously something that you did with Dash. Tell me a little bit about how that all started and what you did.
It is a mind-blowing stat, that 40%. As you mentioned in the intro, what we try to do, my co-founder and I both come from farming backgrounds, so myself from Sussex and Jack from Shropshire, and we saw firsthand that 40% of fruit and veg doesn't end up on people's plates, which is just a crazy statistic. And so we wanted to try and use this fruit and veg that was rejected by the supermarkets, and when we were looking at products that we could create it into, we saw the beverage category up and down the country was just stuffed full of sugary and artificially filled ingredients. So we thought, great, well, why don't we buy this fruit and veg, initially from Jack's farm, and then infuse it into spring water, again from Jack's farm, to create a great tasting drink that doesn't have any of the bad stuff. Latterly, when we tried to understand how much it would cost to set up the facilities in order to buy the fruit and then infuse it on Jack's farm to create a canned beverage, we realised that a canning line cost about £17 million. We thought, okay, not even the Virgin startup loan will be able to fund that, so we'll part that. And so we started small and just try to get the products out there, do lots of tests, learn, and then fast forward 6 years, Dash is in 20 international markets. We've got teams in 3 different markets in the UK, Australia, France. This year we will sell nearly 40 million cans.
That's absolutely incredible in such a short period of time. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And I read a wonderful story about how you tested your product and how you got people to taste it and see what they liked about it. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, it's a good story. It was one that was a bit of a turning point with the way that we spoke about the brand. So when we were testing Dash, we would, in 2016, pop up little trestle tables in parks around London every weekend for 3 months. And we would have a vat of water, chop up wonky fruit and veg, let it rest in this spring water, and then we would carbonate it with a soda stream just on the side. And we would hand out samples to passers-by. And at that time, Dash had 2 unique messages. The first was not having any sugar or sweetener, unique in Europe at the time, and also infusing wonky fruit. And we thought the consumers, they'd be far more interested in the no sugar or sweetener message, which they certainly are, but it wasn't the hook that when we sampled the same people that came by 3 weeks later, they would come up to us and say, oh, you're the guys that infuse wonky fruit, as opposed to it being no sugar or sweetener. And back at that time, no one was talking about food waste. Now, lots of people are. It's absolutely brilliant. Lots of retailers are talking about it from a governmental level. There are lots of structural things that the government are putting in place, which is great. But back then, nobody was. And so we then brought it more to the front of our marketing. So it was on messaging on the back of the can, for example. Now it's on the front of the can. We really try to draw it out with our storytelling.
Yeah, it's a very, very purpose-driven brand, isn't it? And I think what's fascinating is that the purpose behind it clearly was wanting to do something with wonky fruit, but that now has come to the forefront where it wasn't in the beginning, which is, it's all about authenticity, isn't it?
100%.
And that's what people really wanted to see with the brand.
Definitely.
And I read some horrible statistics around the amount of waste that wonky fruit creates in the world. Can you share those? They're really shocking.
So about 40% of fruit and veg doesn't end up on consumers' plates globally. If I was to reference that in another way, the CO2 that is emitted from food waste, if that was a land mass, it would be the 3rd largest CO2 emitting land mass after the US and China. So
Wow.
both in terms of the input that goes into growing this fruit and veg that doesn't end up on consumers' plates is very bad, but then also the externality of the CO2 that is emitted from it is then very significant as well.
That's actually really, really shocking, isn't it? That's a huge statistic. And also sweeteners. There's a World Health Organization report around how bad sweeteners are for you as well.
Yes, there were 2 different reports last year that the World Health Organization published. The first one that came out in around May, they reported that sweeteners, so both natural and artificial, are not a suitable replacement for sugar, and that they do not recommend brands using those type of ingredients as a sugar substitute, because it can lead to cardiovascular disease and all kinds of other issues as well. For us, we like to keep things very simple. So with our products, we don't have any sugar, don't have any sweetener, and we like to think it tastes pretty good.
Yeah, it tastes absolutely amazing. Just getting back to dyslexic thinking, if you look at the 3 things that you did there that are very dyslexic thinking but also make successful businesses, it's disrupting a market, solving a problem, and also giving the customer what they want, which is very much the success for a good entrepreneurial business. Tell me a little bit about how the support that you got from Virgin Startup.
Support was brilliant from Virgin Startup. I went to university and read economics, but you don't get taught all the nuts and bolts of actually building a business. You get all the theoretical stuff, but none of the practical stuff that is super useful. So we came to Virgin Startup in 2016, and they were brilliant at giving us the template and building blocks for how we could create our brand. So things like a cash flow, P&L, balance sheet model that they supported us to make for the first time, because I'd never made one before, funnily enough, when I was 24. And they also gave us a fantastic mentor, a guy called Ben Keane, who is still a huge inspiration for Jack, my co-founder, and I. And he gave us real confidence as well in what we were doing. When one is relatively young and going up against big guys in the industry, really big soft drink brands that have traditionally been so stable in the market and have controlled effectively all the shelf space available, to go up against them, it's quite a daunting prospect. But Ben gave us great confidence and taught us loads of different practical skills to start Dash.
What sort of thing did he tell you about going up against the giants? Because that is quite daunting for a startup, particularly at 24.
It certainly is. Ben was absolutely brilliant. He taught us to don't be afraid to get the product out there, even in a very basic sense. So Eric Ries's lean startup model, which is to get something out there to the world. Don't be afraid by how imperfect it may be at that stage. That doesn't matter. What does matter is that to make sure you do get it out there, then to test, to learn, and then iterate and have that continuous feedback cycle to get better and better. But the number one thing is just to make sure you actually get it out there, because I think so many people have great ideas, but a great idea is only 5% of it. The rest of it is purely execution. And so just making sure you get it out there in the first place is super important.
That's incredible advice for young entrepreneurs wanting to set up, because I think there's a tendency to, particularly I think if you're dyslexic, to want everything to be perfect because you think everything needs to be perfect. But actually it is just about getting something out there, getting a minimum viable product and getting it out there, isn't it? And learning from that.
Yeah, and I think that was quite a big blocker for Jack and I in the early stages, because we wanted the product to look just like it does today. But in order to get there, we didn't have feedback from, for example, when we were doing the samplings in parks around London. It would have been foolish for us to have launched our, what we thought, perfect product before getting that feedback, because, as I said, we've changed quite a lot of the messaging. We put wonky fruit more into the front of it, and there were lots of different things that came out from the testing that meant that we've got the product today that we're very happy with.
And what do you think it was that made you stand out from the giant competitors and the giant companies with competing products?
I think the key for us is we were very clearly differentiated with the ingredients. So very simple ingredient deck. Keeping things simple is one of our brand values, which quite nicely aligns with dyslexic thinking to keep things simple, hence why it's one of our core brand values. And so very simple ingredient deck, not having any sugar or sweetness, so that very clear USP where consumers understand that they're getting something that is actually genuinely healthy, as opposed to quite a lot of health claims that can be a bit more fabricated. And then being truly sustainable and having a very low impact on both people and the planet. So Dash, we have three central sustainability pillars. The first is wonky fruit. The second is being a B Corp. And then the third is being a carbon neutral business. So every decision that we make at Dash is through the lens of those three foundational pillars.
And it's incredible how important that is to the world now, isn't it? I think that part of what you do so well is your storytelling and telling that really authentic story. Tell me a little bit about that. How important is storytelling to you as a brand? And give me some examples of what you've done.
I think storytelling's really important.
Another dyslexic thinking skill.
Another dyslexic thinking. Here we go. Storytelling is absolutely integral to making sure that we're able to cut through the noise. The other big soft drink brands, they've got much bigger marketing budgets than us. So what we need to do is we need to be smart with the way that we are able to communicate with the people that love Dash, and then very concise with the story that we are telling them about. I think if I had one learning from the past, when we started Dash, we weren't quite as we were a bit passive with our communication, and especially over the last few years, we've really tried to make sure that we are less passive, we're more direct, because consumers, they've got so little time to think about anything else in their busy lives that you've got to be able to get across the message super concisely.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw some amazing posters that you had in Australia. I think, was it Melbourne Fashion Week that you sponsored, and some brilliant posters.
Exactly, yeah. So both in the UK, France, Australia, we've had some brilliant Fashion Week sponsoring and a great above-the-line poster campaign as well. So we're actually the official soft drink sponsor of Melbourne Fashion Festival again in March, which is very exciting. So there'll be thousands of Melbourne fashionistas going to that show. We'll be sampling around 50,000 cans. And then we've got this big billboard campaign that we're going live with all over Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, all over Australia. So it'll be very exciting.
And doing things differently as well. We've had conversations with the wonderful Nick Jones, who's the founder of Soho House. Soho Works is where we're filming and where our offices are. He always talks about having your P's in the right order. So the first one is passion. Second is great people. And the third is a great product. And then he says if you have all of those, profit will follow. It seems to me that with you, there are 4 P's. You've also got purpose. Where do you think purpose comes?
Well, purpose was the reason that we started the brand in the first place. So I think all of those ingredients are integral for making a great business. For us, purpose was first, which has been very beneficial along our journey. I think there are some other businesses that are trying to catch up, having been a bit late with being fantastic on the purpose front. It's so hard to turn around a business when it's been quite deep rooted in doing the same thing for years and years. So it's been very beneficial for us having had that core foundation of really trying to make sure that we are better with those 3 core sustainability items of wonky fruit, carbon neutral, and being a B Corp. That's going to set ourselves up right in the long run.
And I guess there's a huge benefit then, being a sort of young company coming in to disrupt a market. You can come in and be authentic with what really matters and your values from the get-go.
100%.
Tell me a little bit more about the B Corp. That's quite tough to get that, isn't it? You must feel very proud that you've achieved that.
Very tough, very tough. So out of all businesses that apply for being a B Corp, 2.5% actually get the accreditation. I think when I first started looking into it in about 2015, 2016, I was relatively skeptical as to whether Dash needed to be a B Corp. It takes so much resource, so much time to be able to gain the accreditation. And when you've only got a very small team and it's all hands to the pump, it's very tricky to allocate resource to something like that. However, when I dug underneath it better, I understood much more about the framework and how fantastic it was from more of a holistic perspective, because whilst we're good on the impact side, it's also absolutely brilliant for making sure that your workplace, all your employees, all your customers, all your suppliers are all treated fantastically and in the right way. So with our team, for example, everyone's got share options at Dash, and we have a huge amount of other benefits that we love to give as well. And B Corp has really enabled us to make sure that we are really great on that. So very proud to be a B Corp and part of that small community.
Yeah, it's incredible. Dash started in 2017. We started in 2017. Our mission is to disrupt the world of dyslexia, to make sure that everybody understands dyslexic thinking. So that's our kind of real sort of storytelling element. We've got big global goals and big global aims. You're already in 20 countries. What's your big global goal? What's your big aim for Dash? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
We've got big ambitions. The great thing about where we're going is that the macro issues that we're trying to solve, of trying to offer consumers a truly healthy soft drink and also to raise awareness about the issue of food waste. Unfortunately, those are global phenomena, not just UK based. So it means that we've got quite a lot of work to do across our 20 different markets, and we'll have more in the future. This year we'll sell nearly 40 million cans, and in 5 years' time we want to get to over 3 to 4 times that. We've got teams set up in international markets in the UK, France and Australia, and the ways that we're going to be able to get there is through new flavours, new ranges, new markets, new retailers, but most importantly being able to do it in all the very Dash-centric ways with how we've set up the company and staying true to our brand mission.
It's incredible. I've got no doubt that you'll get to exactly where you want to get to. If I can take you back to your school days, what was school like for you?
School was really fun with certain subjects and sports and friends, and then there were some parts that were tough. I think especially before being diagnosed with dyslexia, or when I had been diagnosed with dyslexia and I was still doing subjects that I was absolutely rubbish at, it was quite humiliating. And the languages I just remember in particular being absolutely dreadful at.
Me too.
And what I personally like to do, I like trying to make everything as good as possible and putting time into making things being as good as possible. And when you spend a huge amount of time then trying to perfect exams and be able to stand up in front of people and speak in French or whatever language it was, and being absolutely dreadful at it, it was tricky. But I think as time went on, I was then able to specialise more into subjects that I was good at, and it's been hugely beneficial for me in later life, of really understanding what I am good at and trying to hone in on that, and the stuff that I'm not very good at, and trying to build a team that are able to specialise in those areas that I'm less strong at.
And again, I think that is such a dyslexic thinking skill, but such a strong point in business to focus on your strengths and to delegate your challenges. I think if you talk to any entrepreneur, dyslexic entrepreneur, they'll say that's one of the big things that they do, Richard Branson included. And going back to your childhood, you said earlier it was your mum that helped you to identify your dyslexia. Did she help by championing your strengths as well?
She certainly did, yeah, and she was absolutely brilliant at giving me more confidence, as were the school as well. And it's tricky when there are moments when you're feeling like you're stupid for not being able to stand up and talk in French to all the rest of your classmates. You do need someone that can prop you up in those early days.
Yeah, it's really important to just have that sort of confidence to remember or build confidence from remembering the things that you're good at as well. So
Definitely.
Fantastic to have that champion.
Definitely.
So what do you think your 7-year-old self would think about where you are today?
I think they would probably think that I've been very lucky to be able to get here, and they would probably be quite surprised, amazed, considering where I was when I was 7 years old and being humiliated in class for not being able to be as good as other people in specific subjects. And I think they would also be very excited about the direction of where we're able to get to in the future as well. I think where we've got to now is a good start. But I know that with the team, the product, and with the brand that we've got a huge amount of distance to still go, which is really exciting.
And do you think he'd be proud of you?
I think he would be proud. I'd like to think he'd be proud. I think he'd probably think that some of the mistakes that we've made along the way have been relatively foolish, but you always make mistakes. Nothing's going to be perfect, and it's about making sure you can learn from those mistakes and get better as you go along.
So tell us a bit more about those mistakes, because one of the main reasons entrepreneurs are successful is because they make mistakes early and they learn from them early. Can you share some of the mistakes that you've made along the way?
Definitely. And I think understanding of rejection, not being good at stuff at school, does definitely help with when you make mistakes. You get those lows, but you're able to pick yourself up and be very resilient. Another one of our Dash brand values is to be tenacious. And you certainly have to have that building a business. The early days were probably the most challenging, and one of the darkest days that we had in 2016, 2017 when we were setting up Dash was we had put so much energy into and resource into creating this first batch of cans, and we wanted everything to be absolutely perfect, having put quite a lot of investment in at that point. And so we wanted to get this great tasting water from Wales. So Jack and we've jumped in a van, drove to Wales, drove all the way back. Probably took us about 12, 14 hours or so when you include lugging all the water at the facility, and brought it back to a production site in North London. There we had tens of people that we were getting ready to set up for this first can manufacturing run. It got our hopes very high, and plugged in the water, had our delicious extract, which is how we create our infusion process, and had our first batch of cans. And I remember trying one of these cans, and it tasted of off berries.
Oh no.
And at the time, I've never been more disheartened in my life. Then opening up a few more cans, they all taste like off berries. So the lesson there was that with Dash, it's a very simple product, very simple ingredient list that we've got. But with that, it's a very delicate liquid to make. And as such, you need very high quality manufacturers. So from there, we found our great recipe development and flavourologist team who have been amazing ever since creating our great tasting drinks that we've got today.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. So if you had 3 top tips for budding entrepreneurs, what would they be?
My 3 top tips, they're always the same. 3 top tips are, number 1, dream big. And make sure you've got the cash to be able to finance that big dream. Leading on to the second one, which is you need to have your finances absolutely watertight so that at any point in time, you know exactly where you're at from a financial point of view. And then the third thing is what we covered earlier, which is Eric Ries's lean startup model, which is just don't be afraid to test something and get it out there. Nothing will ever be perfect. So the first thing is just to make sure you get it out there and then test, learn, and iterate as you go.
And what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur who doesn't have their finances in order? How do you go about doing that? Can you start from scratch? What would you suggest they do?
The first thing is make sure that you surround yourself with good people who are able to support you, like Virgin Startup did, by giving us the tools and then the know-how to build our financial projections. So surround yourself with the right people, get the right tools to be able to do so. And then the third thing is, once you've got a plan, stick to it. Don't deviate. Sure, if there are great opportunities, do go for them if you assess them, but you do have to make sure that you are relatively strict, because otherwise cash goes very quickly.
And if you had one piece of advice to give to other dyslexics, entrepreneurs or not, what would that be?
Don't get disheartened at school. School is a very structured framework that is a one-size-fits-all, but it doesn't mean that everyone's going to excel in that environment. So don't get disheartened if stuff isn't going right. When you get to your latter years, you will start to specialize in subjects that you are really good at. So make sure you are patient, ignore the naysayers that think that you won't be able to be very good at life at all. You will be. You'll just get to a stage where you can really narrow down and be fantastic at the things you really like.
So find what you love and do it, and don't take no for an answer.
Very well put.
Sounds like perfect dyslexic thinking.
Exactly.
Thank you, Alex. That was really wonderful. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me on. Really enjoyed it.
If you'd like to find out more about what dyslexic thinking skills are and how to recognise them in schools, at work or at home, you can take our free training now. Empowering Dyslexic Thinking in Schools, available on Microsoft Learn, and Empowering Dyslexic Thinking at Work, available on LinkedIn Learning. And please subscribe so you don't miss out on future lessons in dyslexic thinking.